Hello again. Next up, we have an artist talk by Nahla Tabbaa, who will be presenting her new project, Shamsa, that was commissioned by the Jameel Arts Center as part of the Jaddaf Waterfront Sculpture Park commissions. And it was a site-specific kind of intervention and a series of time-based interventions and gestures that look at the passage of time through the impact of the sun. Nahla's commission has resulted in a limited edition artist book in collaboration with graphic designer Layan Attari, as well as a selection of flavored salts and pigments and oil infusions that she will be using in her tasting session following the talk. Right after Nahla's talk, we'll have a moderated discussion with her, Eloisa, led by my colleague Azim, who is the library coordinator here at the Jameel Arts Center. So, yeah.
Hello, and thank you so much. There's something really special about being the last one to speak, actually, because after hearing such incredible speakers, I found so many intersections and overlaps in everything we discussed. So thank you to the team for being so selective and finding ways or believing in how we were all connected through these talks. I'm missing Lucas, who curated this commission and really believed in giving me the time that I needed to create this work. So Shamsa is a name that's given to females here in the UAE. And it translates to a sunburst, or almost like a very enduring way. It's like a little sun. Which I always found quite ironic. Given the fact that, like Eloisa, I arrived here in August 8 years ago, and I remember not being able to breathe from how hot it was. And one thing I noticed when I worked in community and public programming was how the summer season was ultimately a hibernation season. It was a time when things died down. People wanted to leave. There's so much resentment towards the weather in the summer. I, at that time, was also exploring ways to question time, to bend time, to align with different timings, whether it was a divine timing or something that was less man-made but more aligned with nature, with ecology. I was looking at ways to align with the sunrise and sunset, to align with my cat at home who woke me up every sunrise, or to align with the horses that I ride or nature. I also really wanted to deal with public programming in the summer. So this started off at Sharjah Art Foundation, where despite my colleagues having major issues with programming outdoors, I introduced this concept of, well, why don't we start our workshops as early as the sun rising, and let's see what that presents us with. And I also felt that when I was offered this opportunity and this commission, it was a time where I was exploring symbiotic relationships with nature, embracing spiritual ecology, not just as something that I was yearning for constantly, because for those of you who know me, you always find me feeling like I'm running out of time or just chasing something constantly. I'm urban exhausted for most of it, and so looking for times to just connect with a slower pace, practice some aspects like alchemy or writing or cooking even became things that I wanted to adopt as a way to kind of deal with this tension. When I was invited to respond to the space, I was actually invited to respond to the space that we have over here, a beautiful garden with certain aspects of shades, opportunities to walk, opportunities for the public to gather. And this was in July, though. So there wasn't a lot of shades, and the heat was grueling. Lucas was not very happy going outside and taking walks with me. And I also just saw another opportunity, which was to climb up onto the rooftops, probably something that I've enjoyed doing since a child. You're not necessarily encouraged to access rooftops, but Art Jameel were very generous in allowing me full access to the platforms that you see above us. And I was allowed access 24 hours a day, which meant that I was here during sunrise, I was here during sunset. I was ambitious in turning the rooftops into a drying field or a garden that I wanted to cultivate. I really wanted to celebrate the sun and kind of move away from the harshness of the sun that we often perceive and just see how we can use it as a catalyst. The sun has been a catalyst for pickling, for sun drying, but even as we gave natural dyeing workshops, myself and my partner Mahru, and the alchemy of dyeing, this summer was a great opportunity for that, because all we had to do was leave our pots overnight in the sun on our balconies. The next day it would still be steaming, and the acceleration of color was even more potent. And so ironically, it was the summer months that became the best possible time for production. And as we neared towards the winter, that is when my production began to die down. I created a series of interventions, or what I like to call sundials. Some were 35 minutes long, some were much longer. This is a photograph from Abu Dhabi's Seif studio, where I spent and had the opportunity to encounter many stunning sunsets. One thing that I was really desperate to embrace, I think, was this romantic, painterly aspect of sitting with a sunset, the way an artist would, where they have the leisure and the time to paint the sunset and enjoy those colors. The way I did that, though, was by frantically creating these color swatches, trying to match the colors or code the sunset. I also then had the opportunity to do this at Art Jameel. This is the sun rising. And the ironic thing about producing color swatches at the speed of 35 minutes is that even when you've managed to produce that color, the landscape has already changed. But these are some examples of the swatches that I was able to produce. I then moved on to create these sun-drying beds, thanks to so many people who kind of aided me through the process. My mother being one of them. She has been sun-drying on our balconies for a very long time. Her friends as well gave me a lot of advice. Azim as well gave me kind of a method of ventilation where I framed pieces of silk, which I had treated, which I typically do for natural dyeing. And because of its slight elevation and because of the pebbles and because of where it was situated, it actually became the perfect and ideal situation for drying fruits and vegetables. I explored drying all kinds of fruits and vegetables, whatever I could find in the supermarkets at the time, whatever seemed to be in season. From mushrooms to chilies, tomatoes, lemons. What I didn't expect was how they left their imprint as well. And also how the silk ended up absorbing a lot of that atmosphere too. As the final pieces came together and we were able to document them, I really recognized that these are registers of an entire environment and an alchemical moment where, depending on where you were situated in the building, I learned very quickly that anything towards the east was ideal. Everything got moldy in the north and the west. the South was an invitation for birds and ants to come. I don't know why, particularly there, but it happened. Eventually, I realized, and again, thanks to Lucas for allowing me to take the time with this project, is that I was really interested in creating some kind of almanac or thinking about recipe writing as well. So something that we've been discussing a lot is kind of how to contain this information. And so I worked on producing a book. The book was designed by Layan Attari. She needs more credit than just designing it because she made a lot of sense of these different strands of information. I gave her a bunch of colors, prints of the textiles and the fabrics, and these recipes that felt kind of disjointed, slightly nuanced, because it was not necessarily a very straightforward way of producing information or came from a lens of nationhood, let's say, or something I inherited, but it was kind of everything. So she saw the book as an opportunity to present to me an almanac where the order of the book was ordered in the way that the recipes were produced and the colors that were produced as outcomes and as stains. What we saw, Eloisa, maybe, very similar to you, is that the colors of the fruits that were produced, the colors that the fruits produced were very similar to the color swatches that I was producing, and that's how we saw this connectivity. And so Layan also really wanted to work with this idea of keeping the book folded. By keeping it folded, she wanted to invite viewers in this very impractical way to kind of unfold pages where these recipes would reveal themselves. By doing so, she wanted to create this slow reveal process. So you either come across this recipe or you don't, or you just appreciate the imprints for what they are. And finally, with the sun-dried fruits and vegetables that I produced, one thing that I was very concerned with at the start of the project was not working with food for the sake of doing it without at least offering something to my audiences or the community. And with that, we produced a series of salts. Obviously, there's a tasting session that's going to happen. There was this entire feast for the birds and ants, as I mentioned earlier. And I'm going to read a few excerpts of the recipes and talk a little bit about that process. So the first one is sun-dry. So how to sun-dry. Lemon juice, sea salt, drying racks, a sunny spot, torturous heat, fruits and vegetables, grapes, peaches, plums, tomatoes, capsicums, mushrooms, chilies, lemons, oranges. Mom did this every summer in any sunspot she could find, producing batches of solar brewed iced tea and sun-dried tomatoes. I would like to believe we were her assistants, but this isn't one of those moments where I learned this by being part of the process. I was the thief who snatched a tomato or two to taste. When we say goodbye to the deceased, we must wash their bodies one last time before they go into the ground. The same applies to your fruits and vegetables. Honor them by bathing them in a bowl of salty, stinging lemon juice before laying them to dry in your sunspot. With time, you'll learn how to find the perfect sunspot. A gentle breeze visits at night, scorch mourners and angels. And then finally, one for the birds. Gather some overpriced Driscoll berries. Slice these berries in half. Place the berries face down on the picnic mat. The red-vented bulbuls in Dubai will tell their cousins in India that they're salty toot. In no time, they will swarm around your rooftop and feast on your berries. They will leave souvenirs behind, a berry imprint, a feather, a token of gratitude. While they are considered pests for simply eating with gusto, there's no better guest at the dinner table than one wearing a black top hat, a red bib, and chirping joyfully. Writing these recipes, yeah, but presented this other challenge of not wanting to be kind of overly prescribed to writing it in a poetic form, but really staying true to how I felt about certain materials, the kind of violence that was being done to them, and being considerate of that, but also trying to offer just very practical ways to use these dried fruits and vegetables, and hope that you could practice those things at home. And I'd like to leave it up to questions or discussions. I might have gone through my presentation quite fast. I usually do. So, yeah, feel free.
Thank you, Nahla. I always enjoy hearing you talk about your work. I think you have such an intimate and a slow-paced relationship to things. I think if I'm ever annoyed about something, like, I can speak to you about it and you will show me the sunny side of things. So I think you very much are this ray of sunshine. I wanted to ask you about your kind of like excavation process and the way you archive your research, whether it's like very tangible scientific research or these social aspects that you're constantly exploring. How do they come together, and what does your process look like?
So actually, one of our tutors at SIF called it pseudoscience, scientific art. Because yeah, there is this aspect of me being quite process-based and having this desperate desire to be methodological about how I gather information, but it's not always the case, let's say. I mean, there were spreadsheets, there were dates of when I was here, the timings that I was around. I really did try to document all of that, but in the end, I kind of realized that the outcome was more important to me than the kind of the documentation of the process. There were also other aspects that were quite interesting. I had the help of the khidma team over here. It didn't require, well, it was not sustainable to have one person chopping those fruits and vegetables. I tried it once and it was exhausting. So part of the process was calling on to a larger team to make it more sustainable for me to not burn out. Part of the process was us kind of finding shady spots that were accessible enough to the sunny rooftops to make that a little bit easier. Batch purchasing products in a certain way, those all became part of making it, yeah, an easier process, let's say. I hope that answers your question.